Take my mask off because I am so excited. It's been a long time since we had a live Leadership in Technology series talk. In fact, I always do a little trivia question, and yeah, the mic is only for the cameras, not for the room. That's why I'm trying to talk extra loud so that you can hear me. Our speaker will have a mic that will work in both the camera and this. We only have one for the camera. And so let me say welcome first to the Labcorp Leadership in Technology Speaker Series. It has been a long time, and I always do a little trivia question before each. So if you follow us on social media, you're really going to be well ahead of everybody. But, you know, students only. If you can raise your hand, and if somebody can tell me how many days, the person is the closest in terms of days since our last talk. And if you didn't read it on social media, just somebody guess. I got a little prize for you. Anybody? Raise your hand. What'd you say? 20 days? Okay, it's been like 2 years, so go from there. 480. Who said 480? I'm going to give you the prize. It's actually can you pass this back to that young lady? It's actually 581 days since our last talk. So I am so excited to have a live talk and to be out of my house and be back here in front of live students. I'm getting older, but you make me feel young. Couple of things. If you're not familiar with the history of this series, we started it back in 2007 when the department turned 40 years old. And we had, for 13 years, we had 77 speakers. We had countless standing room only crowd. Yeah, we're not going to have a standing room only crowd tonight, but you know, we're relaunching and this is understandable. Plus we have something new. We have a live audience. I want to say thank you and welcome to all the folks that are joining us from wherever you're joining. So this is new. But we also capture this in glorious high definition video. We will put it on our dedicated YouTube channel, and we know from the past that we have thousands and thousands of views into the future. This series was created for not only students of computer science, but students of all disciplines. And I know from the past we have some honor students and scholar students here, so we welcome you all. We especially welcome anybody if this is your very first time. If you're a grad student and you're here and you want credit for attending the seminar, Tammy, if you'll wave your hand. If you have not checked in with Tammy, make sure that you do that before you leave, and she'll get you checked in, and you'll get all the credit that you deserve. COVID shut us down from a number of perspectives, and it also meant the end of that long 13-year run with Fidelity Investments as the sponsor. And I'm so thankful that Labcorp came to us and said, we want it, and we want to make a 3-year commitment to sponsor this series. So we thank Labcorp. Chris, I pass that along to the folks. I know you don't have a huge team here with you today, but they're probably watching. We really thank them for their long-term commitment. So a couple of housekeeping notes. Now would be a great time to silence your phones and be aware that we are videotaping this. So if you're sitting next to somebody you don't want to be seen next to, you move. Also, we're going to try to have a Q&A session if there's time at the end of this. And we'll restate this at that time, but I'll just tell you up front, we're going to have a couple of ambassadors on either side of the room. We have one microphone to capture this for the video. And if you do have that question, just wait until you get the microphone and state your question, and then we'll proceed that way. Without further ado, though, I'm not going to make the formal introduction. I'm going to hand it over to our department head, Dr. Greg Rothamel, who will do that for us. Greg?
Thank you, Ken, and thank you all for showing up tonight. Glad to see you, as Ken says. Glad to see people at a talk. I want to echo Ken's comments and thank our sponsor, Labcorp, for their support and the multi-year sponsorship of the series. Tonight we're honored to welcome Chris Stanley as our guest speaker. Chris has a rich leadership background fueled by more than 28 progressive years leading multiple functional areas, including business development, product management, software engineering, and large-scale program management. His experience is truly global, with successful business growth demonstrated in South America, Europe, and Asia. Currently, Chris serves as Vice President, Clinical and Digital Solutions at Labcorp. Previously, he held executive roles at Allscripts, JDSU, and Nortel, where I think he and Ken worked at about the same time. He's consistently been recognized as a top performer throughout his career, but he maintains a balanced view that puts the welfare of the company and others ahead of his own. He truly enjoys seeing his teams realize and achieve what were thought to be impossible goals. He's been commended for the infectious nature of his strong and open communication style and unquestionable integrity. Chris is an NC State alum. He received his BS from the department next door. Probably they weren't next door at the time, electrical and computer engineering. And he concentrated in communications, and he's also a member of our strategic advisory board. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Chris Stanley.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate everyone coming tonight, taking time out of your schedules, and want to welcome all of those who are here in person as well as those who are joining virtually. And Ken and Greg, on behalf of Labcorp, and in particular, Lance Barbarian, our Chief Information and Technology Officer, we are so excited to be a sponsor for the Leadership in Technology Speaker Series, and I am personally extremely honored to be able to help us get it kicked off after 581 days since our last one. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry of healthcare IT, and we want to explore it essentially through a couple of lenses. I'd like you to think through, as we're going through our discussion this evening, especially focused on patients and providers. Quickly, how many of you have ever been to the doctor? Well, guess what that makes you? A patient. So everyone in this room is a patient. Probably not everyone in this room is a physician, but I want us to think through, as we're looking at what's going on in the healthcare industry and the clinical research industry, through the lens of advanced technology, so the industry of healthcare IT. What have we learned through the course of the pandemic? What's the current state? I'll give you a little bit of a brief overview of the current state of the industry, and then we'll see what happened through the pandemic, what we're still learning, what are some of the impacts that have happened in our industry related to the pandemic. And then we'll go through some examples of how this context of advanced technology is going to help us as we advance health. So, well, Greg did most all of my introduction, but I just will reiterate that my name is Chris Stanley, and at Labcorp I serve as a Vice President of Clinical and Digital Solutions. I am a proud graduate of NC State, class of 1988, a Department of Electrical Engineering, and I spent most of my time really focusing on networking and communication, so it's not unusual that I ended up spending most of my career really more in software systems and large complex systems, and so that's why you might find it interesting that this is my first slide. So you may wonder, what in the world does by the way, this is a rotary phone. Everybody know that that's what this is? A rotary phone, what is it doing in a healthcare IT presentation? Well, when I joined the telecommunications industry, which is where I first started right out of university, I had no idea that in the next 2 decades, I spent about 25 years in that industry, you'll see in a minute, that in the next 2 decades there would be this incredible advancement of technology focused on mobility and wireless that would happen, and that I would get a chance to participate, to contribute, to watch it happen. When I joined that industry, those inventions didn't exist. Fast forward 10 or 20 years, and now there is a device that is obsolete that I would say now not this crowd, but some folks in your generation may not even know how to place a phone call using this device. And now we have devices, I don't have mine with me, but you could hold it up, and it's been replaced by a device that we can't live without. So in that time of 2 decades, maybe even less than that, as a young engineer, I saw a new invention that had not even really been conceived of yet to most people. I'm sure there were researchers working on it for decades. come into play and become something that we can't live without, displace something that has now become obsolete. Well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because in healthcare IT, that same kind of transformation is happening right now. And at the point of where you are in your studies, in your pursuit of careers, and you're figuring out what you would like to do, if you choose to pursue a career in healthcare IT, I just wonder what is going to be your rotary phone experience. What is a device or a methodology or a software system that exists today that in the next decade, in the next 2 decades, will become obsolete and will be replaced by an invention that we don't even know exists or has the potential to exist, that we will find out we cannot live without in the practice of medicine and the delivery of care to patients. So there you go, little opening story about a rotary phone that just happened to be orange. I don't know why it happened to be orange. Maybe that's in honor of the game last week. So, as I mentioned, I spent 25 years in telecommunications and across 2 different companies. It just so happens I've been fortunate enough to live in Raleigh this entire time, which I love. You'll also notice that for me, as an engineer who decided to move into leadership, I was drawn to explore and learn and contribute to a lot of different functional areas. So that helps me have perspective about a lot of different disciplines and roles and ways that people try to behave and react and do things. For the last decade, I moved from telecommunications into healthcare IT. And I've been with both an EHR company, Allscripts, and in that company I led a group that was focused on analytics and reporting. And then for the last almost 2 years, I've been at Labcorp leading a team that is focused on business, solution, and product management. So that has given me a bit of a perspective, again, back to this concept of perspective, of 3 dimensions within the healthcare IT industry. An EHR company, a diagnostics business, and a clinical research and drug development business, both of which are part of Labcorp. And as was mentioned, I am also a member of the Strategic Advisory Board and really enjoy working with other colleagues across other companies and faculty and Ken and the team, and just helping to provide insight to Greg and his team about the future of the department. So at Labcorp, I lead this team we call Clinical and Digital Solutions. Well, what that really means is a set of software products and systems and solutions that serve the needs and provides value to our customers across a variety of segments. Again, this concept of providers, we serve providers, patients, payers. Payers is essentially another word for insurance companies or health plan providers, and also large health systems and many other entities that are part of the Labcorp customer family. So part of what our team does is look at ways that we can help people, help patients through their journeys along the path of going through and navigating the healthcare system. And we provide tools to help providers, help patients, and provide information to patients. So let's talk a little bit about the current state of the healthcare IT industry. And we're going to go through this reasonably quick so we can get to some other good stuff towards the end. So there are several factors, you can call them trends, you can call them market forces, that are impacting the healthcare IT industry. Now you may notice a very big one that I left off. The pandemic. So I did that on purpose, and here's why. Many of these trends, these market forces, were already at play before the pandemic ever started. Now we're going to explore a little bit later how the pandemic has become a bit of an accelerant to some of these, but it's important to understand that this transformation that's happening within the industry was already underway. So let's look at a few of them. So provider burnout, physician burnout. Physicians in the practice of medicine today would likely tell you they don't spend enough time with their patients. They would likely tell you things like they are struggling to deal with the way payment models and reimbursements are changing, and regulations are constantly changing. And as a technologist in healthcare IT, we sort of have to look in the mirror just a bit, because the other thing that they say is the adoption and the implementation of new technologies is one of the key factors that drives or contributes to them feeling stressed and burned out. So as an industry, we still got some work to do to ensure that the services, the products, and the solutions that we provide to physicians are in fact helping them do their job better, and their job is to take better care of patients. The next one I call inadequate interoperability. That is difficult to say, so instead I'm just going to call it connectedness. And what that means in the context of this industry is, historically, a lot of the software products in healthcare IT were purpose-built, meaning they had a particular function, they were designed and built for that function, and it was a little bit of a vertical model. There wasn't much need for many of the systems that were initially built to really talk to each other. Today, because of the vast amount of data that is available across all of these systems, and how through technology, through science, we can use that data in many different ways, there is a greater need for these systems to talk to each other. Let me just give you a very quick example. Imagine you're going to visit your doctor. And you walk into the front door, you check in at the desk, you go into the back, you have the doctor visit, the doctor may order some labs, you either get your labs drawn there or you go somewhere else to have them drawn. Anyway, you come back to the physician's office, or as you leave the physician's office, you check out, you settle up your bill, you get told what is your copay. You just went through a typical visit for a patient, and you probably touched somewhere between 3 and 6 software systems. And if those systems don't talk, you can imagine how that can not provide the best experience in your care as a patient. 86% of physicians would tell you, or in a recent survey they did say, that improving data interoperability among these systems would absolutely improve the speed to diagnosis and improve patient outcomes. On the other hand, 62% of them said that they have to often enter the same data twice into multiple systems. You can imagine how that might contribute to burnout. So the industry is working hard on this. There's protocols that are now becoming standardized. So in that way, it's a little bit like the evolution of what happened in telecommunication. The creation of protocols that are standardized so that you can design to them. And if you design to those interfaces, those APIs using those protocols, and systems can begin to communicate. That's what's happening in our industry. Consumerism in healthcare is really not that much different than consumerism in many other industries. So what does that look like? You all are consumers, you have experienced this. As consumers, and now as patients, we have certain things we expect. We expect convenience. We expect to have a digital experience. Again, back to that device that we can't get rid of now. We expect personalization. So we expect, as we interact with an industry, with a product, with a company, that it's a personalized experience. That is also part of what's happening in healthcare. And the last one I'll mention is the concept of commercial payment models, or dynamic payment models, or changing payment models. There are a lot of stakeholders for this one. There's providers and health systems. There is payers and insurance companies. There's government payers like Medicare. There are large employers. So there's a lot of stakeholders in this one. Here's the three examples of what I'm talking about. Most of the time, even today, a fee-for-service model is what is used. So when you go to the physician, you go have a visit, you go have a procedure done, you have surgery done, you have a test done, all of those things, you pay for that service. And there's a price list, and the insurance companies will determine what they will cover and what the price will be, and so that's how it works. There's also incentives or penalties that the government provides for things like achieving certain quality metrics for chronic diseases, or to adopt certain technologies, or to do things like manage readmissions at a hospital. You can get additional revenue or be penalized depending upon how you meet those criteria. And the third one is the most interesting one. I'd say it's the newest, but actually it's been around for a while. It's just been slow to take off, and now it's beginning to be more prominent. And that is the concept of risk. So it's a relatively simple concept, but it's actually quite complicated to implement. And it is, instead of patients paying a fee for service, it is the concept of the payer, the insurance company, working with a health system and essentially saying, I will compensate you a certain amount per member or per patient. And you take on the risk of whether that patient continues to be healthy or whether they end up needing some other care that is beyond what would be for someone that is healthy. So that is that kind of concept of a risk-based payment. Now, when you go through all of these trends in the market, it sort of creates an opportunity for ways we can react. We've heard this before, right? Challenges and opportunities are sort of synonyms and are the same word. Well, there's other things that are beginning to happen in the industry that are somewhat related to these market factors, and one is consolidation. That also happened in telecommunications, didn't it, Ken? So the way this works is large health systems are tending to get larger. Just look in our own backyard and you can see that. If you've been in this area for longer than a decade, there's hospitals that used to be community hospitals that are now owned by one of the big three health systems in our area. And that's what's happening. Hospitals are buying hospitals, or their large health systems are acquiring physician practices, primary care practices, specialty practices. And so they're growing both vertically, look at that, vertically. They're growing both horizontally and vertically. And that's a trend that's happening in the industry. There's still more regulations that are happening every year. There's more regulations that are happening that affect patients, that affect companies like Labcorp, that affect large health systems. So that continues to be a trend in the industry. And this one is very interesting. And I suspect it's not just happening in healthcare. I suspect it's a truism across multiple industries. And that is, we have no shortage of data. That is not the problem. We actually don't have a problem storing it anymore either. With the changes in the maturity of cloud computing, storing data is not really a problem. The challenge is data in and of itself is not much value. And so what has to happen is IT systems, technologists, have to figure out how to harness the power that lives within that data that you have to go find. You have to translate data to information, to insights, and even that's not enough. The insights have to be actionable. It has to be an insight that you can do something about to impact cost, to impact care, to impact experience. That is a big thing that is a focus within the industry. And the last one, again, back to this idea of some of the payment models, but also in large employers, there is a theme and a big focus on wellness, consumerism. Consumers becoming more engaged, wanting to be involved, taking control. So there is a big focus on wellness and staying healthy across the industry. Whew. Can you imagine and see why this industry is thirsty for technology, solutions that can help drive answers and solve these challenges and create opportunity? Well, if you can say yes to that question, then you're in good company, because 92% of healthcare executives that were responded to a recent survey said that the future of their business value, in other words, what they can deliver to their customers that generates value that their customers will pay them for, that's what business value is increasingly dependent upon their technology vision, roadmap, architecture. So if you are an engineer, if you are a computer science major, then this should just excite you because there is incredible opportunity to come and make a difference. What you're seeing here is a model that's accepted broadly across the industry that is called the quadruple aim. And when you look at it, you may think, wow, some of those things are going to be difficult to do together. In fact, it looks like maybe conflicting objectives of sort. And you're kind of right. Nonetheless, this is the challenge. We have to find ways to improve patient outcomes. Otherwise, why practice medicine? We already have talked about the fact that providers are struggling. We need to find a way to make their experience better. The clinical experience must improve. Patients are becoming more interested in their own care. They're doing more of their own research. They want more control. Regulations are giving us more control. So we have to do things to improve the patient experience. We all have heard how healthcare costs are increasing every year. I didn't find any statistics, but go look up how much they are of the budget in the U.S., of the gross national product in the U.S. So there has to be ways to curtail, to contain, to start to put an emphasis on managing cost within the industry. So here's a few things we can start to do. By the way, another interesting statistic, almost half of us as patients are not receiving the clinical care we are supposed to receive according to clinical care guidelines. That's a pretty staggering statistic. So we need to start doing some things from a technical perspective to help physicians so they can help patients. So where can we start to engage? Clinical efficiency and quality, we can start to ensure that physicians have the information and the insights that they need in their workflow when they're talking to a patient. So ensuring that they have all of the results from the labs that they've ordered. So ensuring that they have information about a patient's chronic condition and where they are in the stages of that condition. All of these things we need to make sure physicians have so they can provide better care. Within our industry, especially the diagnostics industry, we need to make sure that we are doing our part to both help with care and manage costs. So this one has a blend of both. This concept of the right test at the right time is making sure that physicians have all the information they need to order the most appropriate test for their patient that provides both the information they need to help with diagnosis, with prognosis, with next steps in a care plan, and is also the most cost-effective test. An example might be, if you think of it very simply, and back to these theme of things connecting, if you go to see your primary care physician and he or she orders a set of tests for you, and based on those tests, they decide you need to go see a specialist, and then you go see that specialist, and that specialist is on a completely different health system and therefore a completely different technology system, that specialist will probably what? Order those same tests all over again. And you're going, wow, what, as a patient, I did not enjoy that. And there should be a way to prevent that from happening. So now you've ordered, you see what I mean? So that's a tangible example. Value-based care, so if you are a health system, and there are health systems that have decided to move more into this concept of taking risk, and if you are one of those health systems, then you need a lot of advanced analytics. You need to be able to look and study all of your patients and understand where they are in their health, to be able to identify if they've got gaps, care gaps, associated with their condition so you can quickly identify those and get them closed. And all that means is maybe they need another test. Maybe they haven't had something that they're supposed to have for 6 months and it's been 18 months. So those are the things that you need to identify so that you can keep your patients as healthy as possible. Okay. Back to this idea of a patient. So we are all patients. We've all been patients. We've likely potentially been caregivers. We have seen our families and friends be patients. So we all navigate the health system at some point. So the patient journey, we're going to start to shift a little bit more into how Labcorp can help and some of the other trends that have happened. Has anybody, whether it was during the pandemic or before, has anybody used telehealth as a way to, anybody? So this idea of a patient journey involving telehealth, we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's becoming much more prominent. It potentially could help with access. Still some debate about that because you have to ensure there's broadband as well, but it could help with potentially providing access to health care for some that previously were not able to get it. If you think about this practically, it's probably not as startling as it might sound when you first see the statistic. That up to 70% of medical decisions are based on the outcome of a lab test. How many times have you or family members gone to have something investigated, and as a part of the process, after the physical exam, there's a set of tests that are ordered. And then as the tests get examined and the results get examined from the test, then the physician has a much better idea of what to do to help care for you. So it is important that we start, and we are, connect labs to providers, to health systems. Again, this idea of horizontal integration among systems, and also provide information to us as patients so that we also have access to the results of the tests that have been done, and we can participate and be informed along the way. Okay, I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to our company. So we have a short video for you to watch.
Every single day, for the good of millions all over the world, we rise and get to work. We push through the challenges to get a greater understanding.
Squeeze. Don't worry, you got this.
So we can help bring you better tests, more effective treatments and vaccines, and life-changing breakthroughs. And we never stop in pursuit of answers.
By the way, a lot of the actors in that video are actual Labcorp employees, and some of them are colleagues that I know, so it's always really cool to see them demonstrating what we try to do. We are working very hard to deliver on this promise, to be the source for advancing health and giving physicians and others the ability and the information they need to power clear and confident decisions. That's why we pursue answers diligently every day to questions that are hard to answer. Our mission is to improve health and improve lives with a focus on delivering world-class diagnostics. That's our diagnostics business. And also bringing innovative medicines to patients faster. That is our clinical research and drug development business and our focus. And we do it in such a way that we are using technology to improve the delivery of care. The way I would describe it is we rely on deep technical, clinical, and scientific expertise across our entire company that is fueled by creative curiosity that stimulates innovation. This is a little bit of some data points that help to demonstrate that we are doing our best to live into that promise and that mission. So we touch 3 million patients every week and over 160 million patients every year. Our test menu is over 5,000, and that's a lot, but what matters is, do we have the one test that you need? So because of that, we never stop working to introduce the next test that is going to help a physician improve your care. And these tests are wide-ranging. They could be something as simple as cholesterol that gets ordered all the time, something as complicated as a genetic test, and even diagnostic tests that go alongside drug therapy that are called companion diagnostics to make sure that you are the right patient that would benefit the most from this type of drug therapy. We have a large volume of employees that are PhDs or physicians. On my team, we have 2 MDs, which is really exciting. And we now have, back to this idea of data, we have a unified data platform. Everybody has data. We have data. Ours is stored in such a way that we can use it to transform it into information, into insights that are actionable. It has all of our results data, over 35 billion results of tests that we've executed. It has patient demographic information. It even has some information about the coding for payer and insurance. And we can use that data source to help with clinical research. We can use it to provide information and analytics about specific patient populations to health systems. Our drug development team has delivered and developed drugs in over 100 countries. We are involved and have helped to develop the top 50 drugs on the market. We have an intense focus on the area of oncology. And in 2020, we were involved in 100% of the oncology drugs that were approved by the FDA. So this is who we are, and this is part of what we do. And in COVID, since the pandemic and the introduction of our COVID testing, as of September, we have now performed 50 million and counting COVID tests and just over or approaching 6 million antibody tests. Our drug development team has been involved in a myriad of projects and trials related to COVID, approaching 600. We have a diverse set of customers, and this slide is almost oriented. I didn't necessarily do it on purpose this way, but it's almost oriented from a customer of one to a customer of a whole bunch. So it sort of goes from left to right, small to many. A customer of one, that's me and you. A customer of a smaller group of physicians, maybe a small physician practice or a community-owned physician practice, all the way up to very, very large health systems or government agencies or large employers that need our services to help provide testing for their employees. And of course, our drug development business, working with pharmaceutical companies, biopharma companies that are doing research, and also partnering with other CROs that are sometimes partners, maybe sometimes competitors. So this is a view of our customer base. So we're going to take a little bit of a turn here and start to talk about the pandemic and some of the trends and what happened within the pandemic and what is going to be lasting. So these are 3 observations, and I'm sure that there could be a dozen more, many more. These are just the 3 I chose to speak about a little bit tonight. These 3 also were already beginning to happen, but the pandemic became an accelerator for each of them. So let's talk through them just a bit. So shifts in care delivery. I talked a little bit about telehealth and telemedicine earlier. Did you know that that is a $4.5 billion market in the U.S.? During the pandemic, telehealth visits increased by as much as 38 times the pre-pandemic norm. Now, it may not stay at that level, but it is highly unlikely it will go back to the pre-pandemic norm. At-home testing is another capability that perhaps was in place, but got accelerated by the pandemic. So if you put at-home testing and telehealth together, essentially now you've just created what is a large percentage of many in-person office visits, right? We just talked about how diagnostics is so important and lab results are important. So if you can have a visit with a physician via telehealth and the physician can order the appropriate test and get it sent to you and get it resulted back so that he or she can see it, now you've essentially got the essence of a real visit. Now there's one that I didn't put on here that I omitted that I want to just add and talk a little bit. In fact, telehealth is maybe a subset, and this is what I would call the distribution of care. So if you think about yourself as a patient, maybe your family members, maybe your parents, grandparents, their experience with, quote, going to the doctor would have probably been either going to their physician, maybe going to a specialist, perhaps going to the ER or going to a hospital, and maybe going to their local pharmacy to get their medicine. That's kind of what it would be. Very different now. Add to that, those are all still there. Telehealth, at-home testing, at-home drug delivery, clinics within pharmacies. So the care continuum is becoming more distributed. It's another factor that has been affected or impacted by the pandemic. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this one. A decentralized trial, a decentralized clinical trial. Before we talk about that, you kind of have to know a little bit about what a clinical trial is to begin with. Now, we're not going to go through the whole definition of each of the phases of a clinical trial, but I will tell you some important aspects that are related to this shift. A clinical trial requires the definition of a protocol, which is essentially writing down the rules of what kind of patient you need in order to qualify or be eligible for a trial. There's other stuff in there too, but that's one of the key things related to what we want to talk about. And you have to be careful not to make it too restrictive or you won't find any patients that would qualify for the trial. There also has to be the concept of identifying a site and a lead investigator, which is essentially the physician that is presiding over the trial. And typically that is a physical place and a physical person that would work in that place. And then the third thing is to look at where you might be able to find patients, which is this concept of recruiting patients. And before this concept of virtual trials or decentralized trials, that had a little bit of a geographic component to it. You might think of it as a bit of a concentric circle around the site or the site investigator, because the patients who were going to be involved in the trial would need to be able to get to that site somehow physically. During the pandemic, a lot of trials ended up having to pause because of some of those factors. And this idea, which was already in play, in motion, became accelerated and has now become much more of the norm for how to conduct clinical trials. And it's pretty intuitive as to why that might be the case. A lot of the technology that we've already talked about can now be used in conducting a clinical trial. Telehealth, at-home testing. We haven't talked about this one yet, but we will in a minute. Wearables that can monitor and take certain statistics that may be of interest to the trial conductor. Now, what just happened? We took that last item of that geographic constraint and we effectively said that doesn't exist anymore, at least nowhere near like it used to. And there are a lot of benefits for that. Imagine now there are certain community-based physicians that previously would have had no way to do this, but now they can offer what's called clinical research as a care option for their patients. And in some cases, that might be the best course of action for their patient to receive care, is to be able to participate in a trial. This also makes clinical trials available to many patients who otherwise would have not been able to participate. Reaching into communities, reaching into rural areas, reaching into areas that aren't typically where a large academic or research site health system would be. So you can see how this can provide lasting value that was accelerated by the pandemic. This concept of consumerism is showing up again, patients taking ownership of their health, self-ordering testing. This is a little different than at-home testing. This is you and me as a patient deciding that I want to take a specific test, not ordered by my doctor. So I can go and order this test, get it sent to my home, and get the results sent to my portal. Labcorp offers this service already, and it grew drastically during the pandemic, and we are looking to find ways to continue offering additional tests to our product here. And some of you may know this. It's called Pixel by Labcorp. You may have seen it or are aware of it. Also, the ability to compare costs. Some of the regulations I mentioned earlier now give us as patients, as consumers, more information about the cost of the services. So if we're going to have a procedure done at a hospital, we can see what that's going to cost. We can compare that to another hospital. So it starts to introduce this idea that sound a lot like consumer shopping into the world of healthcare. Now, that could have some, you have to be careful with that one, but that's sort of the concept, is this idea of more cost transparency. And the ability to see your data. As patients, we own, not our doctors, our medical records and information. And so there's a trend for that to become more transparent and for us to be able to have more access and to sometimes go ask for that information. Increased use of technology. So, how many people have some sort of a fitness wearable? Anybody? So you are among the people that have made that industry grow rapidly in the last 4 years. The use of wearable technology more than tripled since 2017. That market, by the way, is over $14 billion in the US. Now, think about this for a minute. By the way, any golf fans? I like golf. Anybody watch the Ryder Cup last week? So I watched the Ryder Cup last week, and occasionally they would have one of the golfers, one of the athletes, have on a wearable. And all they wanted to do was to see what his heart rate was before he teed off on the number 1 hole of the Ryder Cup. And they flashed it on the screen. Now, most people's resting heartbeat is what? Somewhere between 70, 72-ish, and these athletes probably in the high 60s. Most of them's heartbeat at that moment was more like 130. Just an example of wearable technology. Now, here's a leap. This is not a big leap. Wearables could become a factor in providing care. It's not a big leap to say, if I can monitor your heartbeat, perhaps I can listen for an irregular heartbeat. And if the wearable can monitor for irregular heartbeat, why can't it send an alert to you and to your physician that says, hey, you might want to check this out? Our daughter is a physical therapist, and I can imagine her seeing this use case where, what if you have someone who might be a fall risk? Pretty typical thing for a physical therapist to evaluate for a patient. Well, what if your wearable was able to sense rapid altitude change? Like from here to there, like that. That could give an alert and a location to say you might want to go check on that patient. That's an example of how this technology is going to continue to grow and maybe be used in healthcare. Digital health apps, you see the statistics there, staggering number of apps that are available to help us take care of ourselves. One I want to mention is called a personal health record. So personal health record is I'll call it the newest cousin to an electronic health record. It's based on what I call more of a value exchange relationship, back to this idea of consumerism. So personal health records provide information to you, to me as patients, around conditions, associations, research, recommendations, and the more information I tell it, the more personalized the experience is for me. So there's that value exchange. Labcorp has entered into this market with our recent acquisition of Ovia Health, which is a personal health record, focuses on women's health, maternity, and parenting. And of course, contactless experiences, consumerism, patients, digital. All right, let's shift a little bit into what we have done to help in the pandemic. In the area of testing, we had a lot of firsts over the last 18 months. We had the first commercial introduction of the COVID test, the PCR molecular test. We were the first to have an at-home collection kit on the market. We've also worked diligently with government agencies at multiple levels. I've given you a couple of examples here at the state and federal level, where even now we are every week sending genetic patterns and doing genetic testing and sequencing on samples so that we can help track variants and characteristics of variants of the virus. We also work with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services to figure out a way to get tests to people who were in underserved populations. And we worked with our partners, Walgreens, to help take our Pixel test to being an over-the-counter product. We also started taking advantage of the data that we were collecting in our unified data platform. We created a specific registry for patients of COVID, patients who had been tested for COVID. And we did some research using AI technology, using NLP and OCR technology to look through all of that information and see what we could learn. And we published one paper based on some of those results. We're also working, mentioned employers being a customer, working with employers to offer services and testing to them so that they could find ways for workers to return to work, frontline workers to return to work. And we continue to work to ensure our patients have access to their information and that their experience was contactless when they had to interact with us to deliver or to have a specimen collected, whether it was COVID or some other kind of test that needed to be done. Okay, and we're going to end up with just a few examples of how we are using technology. So this is a very, very quick flyby, and I'm not going to read through every example here because I want to run through a couple of specific use cases. But we are seeing advanced technology capability used in all of these areas of our business. Clinical trials, oncology, new testing for oncology, better data into our unified data platform for oncology, using our platform, our analytics and unified data platform to provide dashboards and analytics to improve care. All of these things are part of what is happening, and it's happening today. So this is a very tangible example of a situation that we found and that we're helping a customer solve. It's a little bit related to interoperability. It's a little bit related to manual processes that still exist. So here's the situation. A pretty large health system has a partnership with a home healthcare agency that covers about 400 patients. And when they leave the health system, they go under the care of the home health agency for IV infusion treatment. The pharmacist at the health system is still in control of dosing and all of the work that a pharmacist would do around that IV infusion treatment. But here's the problem. Those two systems, those two companies, the health system and the home health agency, were on different technology systems. So that's a problem. So what happened was, in order for the pharmacist to get access to the labs that were drawn at the home health agency, which is also a Labcorp customer, much like the health system, the home health agency was faxing the information. And you can just imagine the amount of inefficiency and wait time and potential patient care, because it was taking a long time for the pharmacist to see what they needed to see. So what were we able to do is, with our solution, we provide access to all of that lab information from both companies to the pharmacist, so they can see what was happening and they can make decisions about dosing, about the IV infusion treatment, get the faxing off the table, improve patient care. We could talk about this one forever, so just read through some of those statistics, because I know we got to move to close. So chronic kidney disease, pretty strong, high prevalence chronic condition. However, it's also a low awareness. As many as 90% of patients who have chronic kidney disease don't know it. So here's the way I'd say it is, chances are very high that you and or me know somebody who has chronic kidney disease, or somebody who's going to have chronic kidney disease, even if they don't know it yet. That's what that means. And it also is a very expensive disease to treat. It is linked with diabetes and with high blood pressure. And you can see some of the information about how much it cost as a percentage of the total cost. Those figures are from 2018. So what in the world can we do about that? Well, we can use products that we have today that can talk to each other to help improve care. So imagine that you have a care manager who is looking across a set of patients and trying to understand what gaps that they have in their treatment. And they find gaps against some of these patients who need to have testing associated with the appropriate guideline-based care for patients who either already have chronic kidney disease or are at risk for chronic kidney disease. And they use their provider portal, their Labcorp portal, and the Labcorp provided analytics dashboards to deduce and to determine what patients need to have that kind of testing. So those patients go to see their primary care physician, and when the primary care physician opens up that patient's chart, then the same system that just solved that last problem can help pull all of that information in view for the physician at the point of care in real time, so they see all of the lab results. They see information about the progression of that disease. They see evidence-based guidelines about what the care plan needs to be. And they even might see a risk score that is an accepted risk score for chronic kidney disease about what the current stage is and what is the probable progression to the next stage of chronic kidney disease. Well, they finish doing all that testing, and then a referral is made to a nephrologist. The nephrologist is able to see all of that information. The patient gets the testing done. The patient is now also able to see their results in the Labcorp patient product that is the same results that their physician is going to see. And then the physician, the primary care physician, and the nephrologist can consult. Now, this was not going to solve and cure chronic kidney disease for that patient, but it will ensure that that patient is getting the guideline-based care that they need using technology systems that can talk together and help the physician have the information they need when they need it to affect care in the most probable way. And the last one is clinical trial recruitment. I mentioned to you that that's a really, really hard problem to solve. So what if we had the ability to take that concept of a protocol, and as a patient is meeting with a physician, to be able to evaluate that patient against the requirements of a particular clinical trial and understand during that visit if that patient might be a candidate for a clinical trial. That's also something that is happening that we're working on right now. So I want to end you with this statement, that we are all patients, and we work very hard to live to our mission and to our promise because we know that we're all patients. And before we jump to questions, I just want to say that I encourage you strongly to consider a career in healthcare IT. If I haven't done anything else tonight, I hope I've convinced you that that would be a worthy place to apply your talents. And we'd love for it to be at Labcorp, but if not, somewhere else in this industry, because you know what? We still have a lot of very good work left to do. Thank you very much.
So Chris, we actually don't have time for Q&A formally, so, but Chris has graciously agreed to hang around for a while, so if you have a burning question and you would like to have it answered, please come down and see him. I just want to say thank you. And almost 80 talks, I've never had a speaker hit me as hard as you have hit me today, because everything he described, I look out and I look at all these young faces. Everything he described, I went through the last year, because I went in and out of medical from Duke to the other, and it was a handoff and all this electronic stuff that had to take place. And I'm just so thankful we have people like you, and I'm so thankful that we have this next generation of people that could work in the healthcare IT, because you're helping folks like myself, patients, go through this. One day you'll learn. You know, right now it's all easy. It doesn't stay this way. But thank you for this great talk. A little token of our appreciation for you right here. Thank you so much. And for those of you, again, if you're a grad student and you haven't checked in with Tammy, you can do that. Or if you need me to sign something, I'll be here. But again, Chris is going to be here and he'll answer questions. Come back on October 28th. We have Dr. Mona Lisa Pinckney. She's a cybersecurity executive with Nike. You think shoe companies aren't technology companies? Trust me, every company's a technology company. They just happen to be selling some really cool sneakers, right? Come back and hear her, okay? Thank you so much for coming, and goodbye to everybody who's online.